Bob Dylan song, one of my favorites. It's actually not famous. It's famous to me. Everything is broken. Everywhere you look, things are falling apart. So Genesis 1 ends with creation being good and humankind being very good. Genesis 2, we don't even make it 2 chapters in the Bible, and there's trouble in the world. And this explains how we live in a world that sometimes is so amazingly awesome, and yet sometimes so amazingly cruel as well. So the Bible talks about how sin came into the world and how it messed things up. Women would have more trouble in childbirth, taking care of the food and the crops. There'd be thorns and thistles. Things would just be a lot harder because sin was in the world. But even more than that, our relationship with God was changed. Adam and Eve before were naked and they were in front of God, no big deal. After they sinned, they ran and hid. And God says, "Where are you? What are you doing?" So things changed in our relationship with God. Was it Adam's fault or was it Eve's fault? The first sin. Or somebody else's. They kind of pointed at each other a bit, I think. Adam pointed at Eve. Eve said it was the snake. Okay? Eve's fault? Well, yeah. Well, Eve said it was the snake's fault. It was all of their faults. Just, this is for all you boys. Just because a girl tells you to do something doesn't mean you should do it, okay? Okay. Unless it's your mom, then you better do it. Yeah. No, both men and women are messed up because of what happened in the garden. And then there was the ground was cursed. Relationships are harder. They hid from God. God took them out of the Garden of Eden because it wouldn't have been nice to live forever on a broken planet that doesn't quite work right. So they were banished out of the Garden of Eden. Do you remember where the Garden of Eden is? Was? Kind of an unexpected place. You can say it, Gavin. Okay, it was I was going to bring my map up here. Oops. Well, I have a big map. Nirmala, do you want to look in my office? I know it's a dangerous place, but there's a big Middle Eastern map. It was Iraq. Between the Tigris and Euphrates River, it was in Iraq. So that's where everything started. And sometimes, like when the Iraq War started, I'm like going, oh no, what if this is Armageddon? I mean, this is where the Garden of Eden was. Maybe this is where people are going to bring the end of the world. But thankfully, that didn't happen. So, Garden of Eden, brokenness. There was words. Oh, there you go. Oh boy, that was fast, Tim. So, yeah. And go Iraq, Baghdad. It's north of Baghdad. I think it's around Mosul. Is actually go north further. I think it's around Mosul something. There's Gardens of Babylon that could be it too, but that's where it started. And keep it there as well, because today we're going to hear where. Thank you. Here's a more colorful map. Here is Egypt, Jordan, Israel, Syria, Iraq. Here it has Euphrates River, Tigris River. It's between those rivers, so somewhere in here. And today, I'm jumping ahead. I shouldn't do that. We're going to come back to Iraq today because Abraham was living in Ur of the Chaldees, which is also in modern-day Iraq. And 3,500 years ago, There were homes in that town that had indoor copper plumbing 3,500 years ago. So Abraham left a very civilized town and headed off in the desert, not knowing where he was going. And we'll find out he kind of went over this way and came down here and settled in Israel. Eventually his descendants ended up in Egypt because there was a famine. Then they came back to the land, and we'll be hearing about that in upcoming weeks. So last week, Nirmala talked about the flood. That was God's judgment. Things went from bad to worse, and God brought judgment on the earth, and only one family was saved, Noah and his family. Since then, an event we're not covering, but it's in Genesis 11, is the Tower of Babel, where people, I was thinking that would have been a song for today if it was legal to play it. Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin. Building a stairway to heaven. That's what the people that tried to do in Genesis 11. He said, we'll work together, we'll make all this technology, and we'll go into heaven with one big long tower. And God saw what they were up to and said, no, you're not going to do that. And languages were confused. And oftentimes, it really would have been nice if we all spoke the same language, but we don't. So that was kind of a judgment too. And today, we kind of have God starting all over again. Just like with Noah, God is choosing someone, and his name is Abraham. So turn to Genesis chapter 12. It is on page 36. Page 36. It has chapter 12 in the call of Abraham. Now, for understanding the New Testament, and this is really good for parents to know as well, to understand the whole Old Testament, you have this promise that God makes to Abraham. And for the next 1,500 years of Israel's history, it all comes back to these promises that God made to Abraham. And even when you get in the New Testament, the first words of the New Testament, they're talking about where Jesus came from and what his ancestry was. And it says that, first of all, it says he was from Abraham. I'm almost there. Matthew 1, an account of the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, 1,000 years earlier, the son of Abraham, 500 years ago. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac the father of Jacob. So in these upcoming weeks, we're seeing God keeping his promises to Abraham. And this is just really important to know, because from Abraham to Jesus, there's a straight link. One of the things I forgot to mention, forget it. I'll just drop that off. Okay, so the Lord said, if you look on 36, you see chapter 12, the call of Abraham. Now the Lord said to Abram, not Abraham, the Lord said to Abram, go from your country, your kindred, your country, your relatives, your father's house, to the land I will show you. So he's saying, we're going to go on a trip, Abraham. Doesn't tell him where. He just says, the land I'm going to show you. I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I'll bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. And in you, Abraham, all the families on planet Earth will be blessed. Now, that is a very big promise to Abraham. Would call himself a wandering Aramean. but he promised him land, that he would be a great nation, and that in him all the families of the earth would be blessed. So we pick up with the story of Abraham today, and again, this is really, really a big story. Do you know, God said to him in chapter 15, maybe you want to turn to that, page 38. Let's look at those promises as well. God kind of restates and he goes even further. The bottom of the page on 38, God's covenant with Abram. After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I'm your shield. Your reward shall be very great. But Abraham said, O Lord God, what will you give me? For I continue childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus. And Abraham said, you've given me no offspring, and so a slave born in my house is to be my heir. But the word of the Lord came to him, this man will not be your heir. No one but your very own issue shall be your heir. And he brought him outside and said, look toward the heaven and count the stars, if you're able to count them. And he said to them, so shall your descendants be. And then there's these words, Abraham believed the Lord, and it was credited to him as righteousness. So Abraham's taken off to a land God's going to show him. He hasn't seen it yet. And then God tells Abram, and he's like close to 100, and so is his wife Sarah. He says, you're going to have a kid. Abraham says, what can you give me? I have no kids. I die, and who's going to get my stuff? And God says, you will have a child. Well, later on in that same column, well, the next thing Abraham says, he believes God, but then he says, but God, how can I know you're going to keep your promise? And God does something really different here. And it was something they did way back. In verse 7, in verse 8 of chapter 15, O Lord, how do I know I shall possess it? And God said to him, bring me a heifer 3 years old, a female goat 3 years old, a ram 3 years old, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he brought them, and they cut them in two. So they killed all these animals, cut them in two, and spaced them apart. And then it says God's presence went between these dead animals. And what that was the person making the promise is saying, if I don't keep my promise, you can do to me what we did to these animals. You can rip me apart. Now imagine someone trying to rip God apart. It's not going to happen. But God stooped down to our culture and ways of doing things, to a way that would give Abraham reassurance, and said, I'm going to keep my promise to you, Abraham. Well, he's still Abram at this point. I'm sorry, we're getting to the name change. So Abram and Sarai kind of are thinking, well, how's this going to work? We're almost 100. God must be thinking that maybe the servant girl, Hagar, is going to have Abraham's kid. So with Sarah's permission, Abraham and Hagar have a baby whose name is Ishmael. And things started out okay, but then Sarah got really jealous of Ishmael and wanted him to leave. And Abraham was kind of torn, and they had to let go. And the angels came back to Abraham and said, no, Abraham, you and Sarah are going to have the child. And Sarai at this point overhears it, and she laughs. And God is slightly taken aback that she laughs. But he turns that around and says, the name of your child is going to be Isaac, which means laughter. because you laughed when I said I was going to do this. So Abraham and Sarah eventually have Isaac. Now, God said you're going to have descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky. Does anybody know how many stars there are in the sky? Okay? 10 billion. Does anybody know? 3 trillion. Have you ever tried to count them?
I bet there's an infinite amount because there's more beyond what we can see. Plus, there might be some outside the galaxy if there's the Milky Way galaxy.
They haven't seen the end of the stars, even on the finest telescopes. They haven't found there's not an end. Has anybody tried to count the stars at night? How many can you see with your eye if you had 20/20 vision?
Not a lot because technically when you register give it as
Good point. It depends on where you're watching. If you're 3,500 years ago in the desert in the Middle East, it's very clear. Okay? And I've seen estimates, and you can Google this, but that the naked eye at night can see about 6,000 stars. How many descendants of Abraham are there? So, physical descendants, it's Abraham and Isaac, Isaac and Jacob. Jacob becomes Israel. So the question is, how many Jewish people are there who are physically, genetically descendants of Abraham, who can genetically go all the way back? I did some genetic counseling and I learned a lot, but I forgot it all today. But it was good, I know that. But there are about 15 million Jews in the world who claim physical ancestry or physical genes to Abraham. But Abraham is also a father of the faith. The Apostle Paul makes clear that the promises made to the Israelites are also to the non-Israelites. So Christians believe that God kept his promise to Abraham, and when he said all the families of the earth will be blessed through you, he was talking about all the non-Jewish people who are going to be part of the people of God one day. And how many Christians are there in the world? You don't have to be exact, okay? I think the latest I found was 2.4 billion Christians. And it's not only Christians and Jews that claim Abraham as their spiritual ancestor. The Israelites, he's their physical, genetic ancestor as well. But what other faith group in the world that claims Abraham as their spiritual ancestor? It's a pretty major religion from the Middle East. Islam. And how many Muslims are there in the world? At least 1.6 billion. So between the Christians, Muslims, and Jews, that's 4 billion people. How many people are on planet Earth?
7 to 8 billion.
I think it keeps going up. Yeah, I don't know, it's 7 or 8 billion, I think. So 4 billion claim to be claim Abraham as their spiritual or their physical ancestor. So think about that. God tells this guy 3,500 years ago to go, I'm going to make you a land, I'm going to bless you, I'm going to make you a nation, I'm going to make your name great, I'm going to give you descendants. Your descendants are going to be more than the stars in the sky. And 3,500 years later, there's 4 billion people who claim Abraham. So Abraham is a big deal. Big deal. The Muslims say that, I don't know if this is in the Quran, but it's what they believe, that the real blessing from God went from Abraham through Hagar to Ishmael. And then they say, but the Jews changed the history and said it came through Isaac. And so some of the tensions between Jews and Muslims go back, way back, 3,500 years. And it's just amazing. It starts with Abraham. You know, before now, when the flood was, we don't exactly know when. When Abraham lived, we know that was about 3,500 years ago. And I think now's a good time, Tim, to do the PowerPoint, because I have some pictures related to Abraham near the end of it. So why don't we go guys and gals, or men and women, so parents can answer with their group. Quiz show. Multiple choice. Ooh, this is like Jeopardy. Abraham was born when? Let's ask the girls this question. When was Abraham born? A, B, or C? Wait, it's the girls. I think it's C, and it's probably 3,500 years ago. Your grandma isn't 3,500 years old. Your mom isn't like 1,700 years old, so yeah. Okay, next question. This one's to the guys. God promised to make of Abraham and Sarah. Something I forgot in the story, I'm sorry, is God changed their names from father to father of many. I think that's what it was. Is that right, Nirmala? Abraham means father of many, many. And Sarai's name was changed to Sarah after she had Isaac. Okay, so God promised to make of Abraham and Sarah, which one of those? Is that your final answer? It's A. Is that right? Yep. Okay. Question for the girls. Talk about patience. Oh, this is a good one. Abraham and Sarah waited this long to give birth to their promised child. A, 9 months. B, 13 years. C, nearly 100 years. Okay? C, nearly 100 years. Good one. So how many moms here would like to have a child at 100 years old? No? No. How about if you waited 100 years for a baby and then, it's possible. Then maybe you'd consider it. Okay? But if, say, oh yeah, then I'm not getting to the sacrifice today. This is a sidelight. This is for the moms and dads too. And this is a good one to tell when you're here. Do you know why? Later, God would ask Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. And Abraham was willing to do it. After waiting that long, he was willing to sacrifice Isaac. Some of the scholars say they're quite sure that Abraham was 12 years old. And do you know the reason why? Because if he was a teenager, it probably wouldn't have been a sacrifice. Good. That's usually what happened. The parents catch it. So, okay, let's go on. It's back to the guys, isn't it? Okay, what is the answer? C? Oh, you got it. Next question. God was involved in Abraham's everyday life. This means A, B, or C? C. We have many C's. Okay, both A and B. Next. True or false? Oh, this is good. Okay, God changed Abraham and Sarah's name as a sign of the covenant. True or false? True. Okay. This is for the gals. Abraham and Sarah didn't care whether they ever had a child. They didn't care. Whatever. Okay? True. Oh. Oh. They're going ahead. Well, you said it boldly. You almost had me there. When God told Abraham to get up and go, Abraham thought about it for a few years. False. You got it. Okay. Say, Tim, let's zip through the next ones. I don't want to end too late. Blessing is a common theme. That's true. It's easy to hear God speaking to us. It's not always easy. I think that's false, probably. Oh. He speaks to us through His Word, through the Bible. He speaks to us through others. Sometimes it's hard to figure out. Keep going. Yeah, keep going. That's the verses we looked at. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Okay, this is showing some of the maps. Let's go to the next one. Here shows where he started off at. You see Babylon and Iraq. Oh, Ur was further down than I thought. So yeah, show them where Ur is. There's Babylon. So that's Baghdad is Babylon. And then below there, go down to the right, You see that Ur there. That's where Abraham started from. And ended up over in Israel. Okay, next. Okay, this is a slide I wanted to show you. So in 2013, my wife Jill and I, Jill, wave your hand. Maybe all the parents don't know who you are. Yep. She has to put up with me. Pray for her. This is the place where Abraham is buried. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. His bones have been here for over 3,000 years. The next picture, and this is kind of like a tent over the grave, and that's where he lays. Now, this is probably the second most holy place in Israel. And they have a mosque on one side and a synagogue on the other. So if you're Jewish, you come in from the synagogue to see it. If you're Muslim, you come in from the mosque to see it. And there's been some violence here before. So that's why they have separate entrances. But so they can see the grave of Abraham. Isaac is buried there. Jacob is there. I think Sarah is there, as well. So it's amazing. So when you learn about Abraham, just know we'll come back to him again. But this is where the Bible really takes shape, that God is up to something. He's going to bless Abraham, his descendants, and at the end of the day, all the families on the earth are going to be blessed for what God is starting through Abraham. So let's stand and join together in the Apostles' Creed. Okay. That's a good question. I would guess somebody's thought of that before. I know this, they haven't been able to find Jesus' bones because he rose from the dead, right? Can't find his bones. Okay, so do you believe in God the Father? Okay, let's say it slow. Do you believe in Jesus Christ? Slow down. Okay, do you believe in the Holy Spirit?
I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints, the forgiveness
Okay. These guys are saying it so fast because they were reading it off the paper. If you read it, you got to go slow. Okay. So into the small groups, the mentors will lead their small groups. Parents follow your youth wherever they go. You know that town where Abraham is buried is Hebron. That's where the Bible says he was buried. Plus, there's a well there that's referred to. And there isn't many wells in the Middle East that are good wells. So it's one of the more authentic sites.